maintenance fees, all 2,500 of them, are now officially in my name, Uncle Roger. It's final. Vince leaned against my mahogany desk, the one Teresa bought me for my retirement. He held a letter from the resort, his smirk sharp under the desk lamp's glow. Sunlight filtered through the blinds of my home office, catching dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny, silent witness. My office, once my sanctuary filled with memories of a life well lived, now felt like a cage he had built around me. He let out a short, barking laugh that echoed off the book-lined walls. You should have just given it to me when I asked. Would have saved us all this trouble. But no, you had to be stubborn. His voice dripped with condescending pity, the kind reserved for a child or a fool. Now you got nothing. No beach, no sun, just these four dusty walls. The finality of his words hung in the quiet room, as heavy and suffocating as the summer humidity. Vince waved the official-looking document, the resort's logo stark against the white paper. See? All legal. Deed recorded, fees transferred, my name, my property. He tapped the paper with a manicured finger. The county clerk doesn't make mistakes. My photos, my travel souvenirs, the little shells Teresa and I collected from that very beach, they all seemed to mock me from their shelves. I was a stranger in my own home, a king cornered in his castle by a usurper who shared his blood. I didn't move. My hands remained folded calmly on the desk blotter, my breathing even. I simply watched him, my expression unreadable. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of my lips. It wasn't a smile of defeat, but something else entirely, something he couldn't decipher. He mistook my silence for surrender, my stillness for the resignation of old age. He couldn't see the gears turning, the cold, meticulous machinery of a plan clicking into place behind my tired eyes. What? Cat got your tongue, old man? He sneered, tossing the letter onto my desk. It slid to a stop next to a silver-framed photograph. My gaze drifted to it, then back to his smug face. The air crackled with unspoken tension. I drew a slow, deliberate breath, my hand moving ever so slightly towards the frame. The revelation was on the tip of my tongue, the words that would shatter his victory. But 3 months earlier, on a cold Tuesday in March, it all began with a simple phone call. The phone rang at 10:15 a.m. "Hello, may I speak with Mr. Vince Gable?" That cheerful, professional voice asked. I corrected her. "This is Roger Gable. Vince is my nephew." A pause. "Oh, my apologies, sir. Our records show a Mr. Vince Gable as the primary owner for Unit 3B at the Sandpiper Resort. I was just calling to confirm his reservation for the first week of August." My blood ran cold. Unit 3B was my timeshare, mine and Teresa's. We'd bought it in 1998. I hung up the phone, a tremor in my hand. My condo, usually a place of comfort, suddenly felt vast and empty. Every corner was filled with souvenirs from our travels, a hand-carved mask from Kenya, a painted tile from Lisbon, a small conch shell from the very beach the timeshare overlooked. I could almost smell the faint, lingering scent of salt air. This wasn't just a property. It was a library of our life together, and someone was trying to tear out the final chapter. I called Vince immediately. He was all smooth reassurances and feigned concern. "A clerical error, Uncle Roger. That's all it could be. Don't you worry. I'll make some calls and get it all sorted out for you. You know how these resort companies are, always mixing things up." His voice was a placating balm, but it didn't soothe the sharp, cold spike of suspicion lodging itself in my gut. He was too calm, too ready with an answer. A week later, with no word from Vince, I went to the large metal footlocker where I kept our important documents. It smelled of aging paper and cedar. I lifted the heavy lid and began sifting through old tax returns and insurance policies. My fingers finally brushed against the thick vellum of the original timeshare deed. Tucked right beside it was a small silver frame. I pulled it out. It was a photo of me and Teresa, grinning on the balcony of Unit 3B. Dated July 16th, 1998. Vince dropped by that afternoon, unannounced. He saw the open footlocker and the papers spread across my dining table. "Still worrying about that, Uncle Roger? I told you, I'm handling it." His eyes flickered over the documents, a predatory glint I'd never noticed before. He picked up the framed photo of me and Teresa. "Cute picture," he said, his tone dismissive. He placed it face down on the table. "Just a dusty old memory. The papers are what matter. Let me see that deed." His casual disregard for the photo, for the memory of his aunt, sent a chill down my spine. That was the moment the suspicion hardened into certainty. He saw a piece of paper, an asset. I saw Teresa's smile, the sunlight in her hair, the last great vacation we took before she got sick. To him, it was worthless. "Don't worry about the deed, Vince," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'll handle this myself." His expression tightened for a fraction of a second, before the charming mask slipped back into place. My next call was to the county clerk's office. The woman on the line was patient but firm. "Yes, Mr. Dable, I have the record right here. A quitclaim deed was filed on March 12th of this year, transferring ownership of that property for Roger Gable to Vincent Gable. It's all been processed." My heart hammered against my ribs. Processed. Filed. It sounded so irreversible. "But I never signed any such deed," I insisted, my voice sounding weak, even to my own ears. That evening, I confronted him. I laid the facts out on the table, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't felt in decades. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just sighed, as if I were a tiresome burden. "Look, Uncle, you never use it. It just sits there, racking up thousands in maintenance fees every year. It's a waste of money." His justification was so cold, so practical, it was more insulting than an outright lie. He was positioning his theft as a favor. "I'm actually putting it to good use," he continued, leaning forward with an air of faux sincerity. "Me and Tiffany are going in August. We need a real vacation. You get it, right? It's better this way. I signed the papers for you. It was just a formality to make it official." He admitted to the forgery, with the same casual tone someone might use to admit they borrowed a cup of sugar. There was no remorse, only entitlement. The asset was being wasted, and he was the rightful heir to its enjoyment. My mind flashed back to the summer of 1999. Vince was 12, his parents' divorce a raw, gaping wound. My sister with a wreck, and his father was gone, so I took him. I took him to Unit 3B for 2 weeks. I taught him how to fish off the pier. We built sandcastles and stayed up late watching old movies. Teresa made him his favorite pancakes every single morning. We gave him a refuge, a place to feel safe. And this is how he repaid us. By stealing that very sanctuary. I hired a lawyer, a young man named Peterson with a cheap suit and an optimistic smile. He listened to my story, nodding sympathetically. "Forgery is a serious crime, Mr. Gable, but it can be difficult to prove, especially within a family. We'll have to file a motion to declare the deed void. It will be a fight." The estimated legal fees he quoted were staggering, nearly a quarter of the timeshare's value. It was a war of attrition, and Vince knew I was a 77-year-old man on a fixed income. A week later, I received the first legal response from Vince's attorney. It was a brutal, dismissive document. It painted me as a confused, forgetful old man, suggesting I had willingly signed the deed and was now suffering from seller's remorse. Or worse, dementia. They were using my age against me, turning my greatest vulnerability into their sharpest weapon. Every line of legalese was a carefully crafted insult, designed to humiliate and exhaust me into surrender. The ticking clock grew louder. An invoice for the annual maintenance fees arrived in the mail, addressed to Vincent Gable at my address. $2,500, due in 60 days. If he paid it, it would be another piece of evidence that he was the legitimate owner, acting in good faith. It was a strategic move, designed to solidify his fraudulent claim in the resort's eyes. Each day that passed felt like another shovel of dirt on the grave of my ownership. I started spending my days in the home office surrounded by the ghosts of my past travels. The room felt different now. The happy memories were tainted. I'd pick up the photo of me and Teresa, her smile a painful reminder of what I was losing. The silver frame felt cold in my hands. The picture was becoming a symbol of my helplessness, a testament to a past I could no longer protect. Vince hadn't just stolen a property. He'd stolen a part of my history, a piece of her. One afternoon, my granddaughter, Chloe came to visit. She's a good kid, a paralegal at a big downtown firm. She saw the legal papers on my desk and the worry etched on my face. I explained the situation, and she listened patiently. Grandpa, these things get messy, as lawyers just trying to bully you. She offered to look over the paperwork, a small flicker of hope in the suffocating darkness. For the first time in weeks, I felt I might not be entirely alone in this fight. A few days later, Chloe called back, her voice strained. I'm so sorry, Grandpa. The deed looks solid. The signature is a decent forgery, and it was notarized. The notary is a man named James Corbin. His stamp and signature are on the document. The county clerk accepted it because on its face, it appears perfectly legitimate. It was a crushing blow. The system was working exactly as it should, but it was validating a crime. The notary seal was the lock on the cage, and Vince had the key. This was my first taste of true public humiliation. I had to call the timeshare company's main office to formally dispute the ownership, to put my claim on record. The woman in the ownership department was polite, but her tone was cold and dismissive. Sir, we have a legally recorded deed on file. We cannot just ignore a notarized document filed with the county. Until a court orders us to do otherwise, Mr. Vincent Gable is the owner. I was just a crank call to them, a confused senior citizen. My own lawyer, Peterson, started to sound less optimistic. Without a confession or a handwriting expert, which is expensive and not always conclusive, this becomes a he said situation. The notarization gives him incredible leverage, Roger. A notary is a state-appointed witness. It's their job to verify identity. The court will see that seal and assume everything was done by the book. It was my word against the legal stamp, and my word wasn't worth much. The final insult of that week came not from Vince, but from his mother, my own sister. She called me, her voice thick with misplaced righteousness. Roger, you need to stop this. Vince told me you gave him to timeshare. You know you can't manage these things anymore. You're just embarrassing the family with these accusations. He had poisoned her against me, twisting his theft into an act of kindness and my fight for justice into the ramblings of a senile old fool. I was isolated. My family, the legal system, the resort itself, they all saw Vince as the rightful owner and me as the problem. I sat at my desk, staring at the invoice with his name on it. The $2,500 fee was a guillotine, and the due date was its rope, slowly being cut. I felt utterly and completely defeated. My only option seemed to be to give up, to let him win. But as my eyes scanned the desk, they landed once again on that silver-framed photo of Teresa and me, still face down where Vince had left it. I picked up the photo, my thumb tracing the edge of the silver frame. A wave of profound loss washed over me. It felt like I was failing Teresa, letting a memory she cherished be stripped away and soiled by greed. I turned it over. Her smile, radiant and full of life, beamed at me from across the years. The photo was taken on July 16, 1998, the very day we closed on the property. We were so proud. It was our piece of paradise, a legacy of joy. Now, it was just a painful reminder of my powerlessness. Defeated, I began cleaning out a few drawers, a grim act of acceptance. Tucked in the back of one was an old business card holder from my salesman days. Inside, behind a faded card for a long-closed restaurant, was a folded piece of paper. It was a receipt from the notary we used back in '98, a woman named Eleanor Vance. Stapled to it was her business card, Mobile Notary Public, it read, with her commission expiration date printed at the bottom, June 30th, 2002. A completely irrelevant piece of memorabilia. I almost threw it away. A week later, Peterson called with bad news, the crushing defeat I'd been dreading. Roger, they've filed a motion to dismiss. And they've also countersued you for legal fees and defamation. It was a brutal, strategic move. Not only was I going to lose, but I was also going to pay for the privilege of being robbed. His lawyer is aggressive. He claims you're harassing his client. I think we should consider settling. Settling meant surrendering. It was over. The fight was lost. That night, I couldn't sleep. The weight of the defeat was a physical presence in the room. Around 2 a.m., I walked into my office and sat in the dark, the faint moonlight painting stripes across the floor. My hand found the framed photo on the desk. I wasn't thinking about the timeshare anymore, but about Teresa, her pragmatism, her quiet strength. She never backed down from a bully. What would she have done? I felt a deep, hollow shame. The next Saturday, I overheard something that changed everything. I was at the local coffee shop, and Vince was there with two of his friends, holding court at a corner table. He was loud, arrogant, and basking in their attention. Yeah, it's a sweet deal. Ocean view, 3 bedrooms, totally free. The old man hasn't used it in years, so I basically did him a favor taking it off his hands. He's getting a little, you know. He tapped his temple, and his friends chuckled. The quiet hum of the cafe faded to a dull roar in my ears. His casual cruelty was breathtaking. He wasn't just a thief, he was proud of it. He was bragging about his conquest, framing his elder abuse as a clever life hack. That conversation wasn't just an insult, it was a clue. It showed a level of arrogance, of supreme confidence, that could only come from someone who believed they had committed the perfect crime. And perfect criminals often get sloppy. They underestimate their victims. They overlook small details. A new kind of energy surged through me, not anger, but cold, clear focus. I went home and straight to my desk. I looked at Chloe's notes again. Notary, James Corbin. I looked at the forged deed Vince had so arrogantly left behind. There it was, the notary's stamp, a circle of ink, a name, and a commission number. It was the seal of legitimacy, the very thing that made his crime unbreakable. But something about Vince's brag, his absolute certainty, made me look closer. Then my eyes drifted to the photo of me and Teresa. We'd signed the final papers that day, July 16, 1998. The notary, Eleanor Vance, had come to our hotel to do it. We took this picture right after she left. I remember her saying, "Congratulations, this is all legally recorded and official now." A memory sparked, a tiny connection between the past and the present. Notaries, deeds, dates. The cogs began to turn. I pulled out the old business card for Eleanor Vance I'd found. Commission expires, June 30th, 2002. A notary's commission has to be renewed. What if Vince's notary had let it lapse? It was a wild long shot, but I had nothing left to lose. I went to the Secretary of State's website, the office that licenses notaries. I found the public database and typed in the name from the forged deed, James Corbin. My heart pounded as I hit search. The result loaded instantly. James Corbin, commission number 884592, status active. My shoulders slumped. It had been a foolish hope. But then I looked closer. Commission effective March 14, 2024. Commission expires March 13, 2028. My eyes shot to the date on the forged quitclaim deed, March 12, 2024. My breath caught in my throat. I checked the dates again and again. It wasn't a mistake. The gears of the entire universe seemed to click into place with a deafening boom. His notary's commission had expired 2 days before he stamped my forged deed. The renewal didn't kick in until 2 days after. For a 96-hour window, James Corbin was not legally a notary public. His stamp, his signature, his official witness, it was all legally void. The county clerk's office, processing thousands of documents, had missed it. They'd checked for a valid commission number, not if he was active on that specific day. Vince's perfect, unbreakable crime had a fatal, microscopic crack. The entire legal case, the mountain of paper, the threats from his lawyer, all of it rested on the validity of that one small circle of ink. And it was worthless. The photo of me and Teresa, the one he'd dismissed as a dusty memory, was the key. The date on it, July 16, 1998, had been my anchor. The thing that made me dig into the past, into the mundane details of notaries and commissions. He liberally tossed aside the instrument of his own destruction. I didn't call my lawyer. Not yet. This was too delicate, too perfect. I spent the next 2 days gathering my evidence with surgical precision. I printed the screen captures from the Secretary of State's website showing the commission lapse. I made certified copies. I drafted a letter, not to Vince or his lawyer, but to the head of the legal department at the timeshare company. I was no longer a confused old man. I was a man with a nuclear weapon. My plan wasn't just to get my property back. It was to ensure Vince understood the totality of his miscalculation. I was going to let him walk right up to the finish line, confident in his victory. He was due to pay those $2,500 maintenance fees in 3 days. I wanted him to make that payment. I wanted him to invest his own money into the property he thought he'd stolen. It would make the reversal all the more exquisite. On the day the fees were due, I checked my bank account. Nothing. The day passed. The next morning I received an automated email from the resort, a payment confirmation for invoice number 7345. Payer, Vincent Gable. Amount, $2,500. He'd done it. He had paid the fees on a property he would legally own for less than 24 more hours. The trap was now baited, set, and sprung. All that was left was to let the animal know it was caught. With the payment confirmed, I initiated my countermove. I didn't file a messy lawsuit. I simply contacted the timeshare company's legal department directly with my original deed and the incontrovertible proof of the invalid notarization. I sent it via certified mail, email, and a fax for good measure. I explained that the deed in their possession was fraudulent and legally void due to a fatal error in its execution, and that any claim of ownership by Vincent Gable was therefore null. The response was swift and panicked. A senior paralegal from the resort's corporate office called me less than 3 hours later. Her voice was the complete opposite of the dismissive agent I'd spoken to before. It was filled with deference and urgent apology. Mr. Gable, we have reviewed your documentation. Please accept our sincerest apologies. An error of this magnitude is unprecedented. We are immediately reversing the ownership record. Furthermore, she continued, her voice tight with professional damage control, we will be crediting your account for the $2,500 maintenance fee that was erroneously paid by Mr. Vincent Gable. That is now your credit to use for next year's fees. The matter is closed on our end. Your ownership is secure. Not only did I get my timeshare back, I got a free year of maintenance, paid for by the nephew who tried to steal it from me. Now for the final piece. I called Vince. Vince, I said, my voice calm and even. I need you to come to my office this afternoon, around 1 o'clock. There are some final papers you need to see. I kept my tone neutral, letting him believe this was about my final surrender, perhaps to sign a settlement. His reply was dripping with smug satisfaction. Sure, Uncle Roger, I can spare a few minutes to wrap this all up. The quiet afternoon sunlight was filtering through the blinds, just as it had been 3 months prior. The stage was set exactly as it was at the beginning of this nightmare. He arrived precisely at 1 p.m., wearing a suit, looking like a victorious conqueror, ready to accept the spoils of war. He probably thought I was about to hand him a check for his legal fees. He had no idea he was walking into an execution. He sauntered into my home office, that familiar smirk already playing on his lips. All right, Uncle, let's get this over with. What do I need to sign to make you go away for good? He was enjoying this, the final twist of the knife. This was his last arrogant insult, delivered in the heart of my home, surrounded by the memories he had tried to erase. He was completely unaware that the trap had closed around him. This brings us back to where we started, Vince leaning against my desk, gloating over the maintenance fee letter, convinced of his absolute victory. The county clerk doesn't make mistakes, he had said. He was so sure, so arrogant. I let his words hang in the air, savoring the moment. I watched the confidence swell in his chest, the final, foolish pride before the fall. All the humiliation, the sleepless nights, the quiet desperation, it had all been leading to the single, perfect moment of reversal. I slowly pushed a single piece of paper across the polished surface of the desk. It was the printout from the Secretary of State's website. You're right, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The clerk didn't make a mistake. You did. He glanced down, his brow furrowing in confusion. He read the name, James Corbin. He read the dates. I watched his eyes scan back and forth between his deed's date, March 12th, and the commission's effective date, March 14th. I saw the precise moment the blood drained from his face. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The smirk evaporated, replaced by a slack-jawed horror. The color drained from his face, leaving a pasty, sickly pallor. That's not possible, he stammered, his hand shaking as he reached for the paper. It's a typo. It has to be a typo. His entire world, built on a foundation of forgery and arrogance, was crumbling to dust in the space of a heartbeat. It's not, I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. I then slid a second document towards him, a letter from the resort's legal team confirming my undisputed ownership and acknowledging his erroneous $2,500 payment as a credit to my account. Timeshare deeds are recorded just like real estate, Vince. An invalid notarization makes the transfer legally void. From the moment it was signed, it never happened. He stared at the letter, his mind refusing to process the words. His composure finally shattered. You can't do this, he sputtered, his voice cracking. I'll sue you. I'll sue the notary. I'll sue the county. I simply leaned back in my chair, the old leather groaning softly. You'll do nothing, I replied, because to sue, you have to admit in a court of law that you hired a notary to witness a forged signature. You would be confessing to a felony, forgery, wire fraud, mail fraud, elder abuse. Shall I continue? Each word was a hammer blow, dismantling his blustering rage and leaving only raw, pathetic fear in its place. He looked around my office, at the souvenirs and books, as if seeing them for the first time. He wasn't a conqueror in a castle anymore. He was a cornered rat in a cage of his own making. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by his ragged breathing. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted with crushing, beautiful finality. I stood up slowly. I walked to the side of the desk and picked up the silver-framed photograph of Teresa and me. I held it up so he could see it clearly. You know, Vince, you called this a dusty old memory, I said, my voice quiet again. You were right. It is. It's a memory of July 16th, 1998. The day we signed the original deed with a very professional notary, whose commission was, of course, fully active. You tossed it aside because it had no monetary value, I continued, placing the photo back on the desk, facing him. You saw an asset, a dollar amount, but you never saw the whole picture. You never understood what this place meant. Not to me, and not to your Aunt Teresa. His eyes were fixed on the photo, on the smiling face of the woman whose memory he had so casually desecrated. For the first time, a flicker of something that might have been shame crossed his face, but it was too little, too late. You didn't just try to steal from me, Vince. You tried to erase her. And for that, there is no forgiveness. I walked over to the office door and held it open. The quiet command was unmistakable. His bravado was gone, replaced by the shuffling, hesitant movements of a defeated man. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was a stranger again, just as he was before I took him under my wing, all those years ago. He paused at the doorway, a desperate, last-ditch plea in his eyes. Uncle Roger, the money. The $2,500. Can I get it back? The sheer audacity of it almost made me laugh. After everything, the theft, the lies, the humiliation, his final thought was for the money he'd lost in his own trap. It confirmed everything I needed to know. His soul was a barren ledger of profit and loss, utterly bankrupt of decency. Consider it a non-refundable deposit, I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. A small fee for a very expensive lesson. I watched his face fall, the last glimmer of hope extinguished. He had lost the property, his dignity, and now his money. He had lost everything, all because he underestimated the old man and overlooked the dusty old photograph. He finally seemed to understand the totality of his defeat. He stumbled out of the office and down the hall. I didn't watch him leave the condo. I didn't need to. The battle was over. I had won. I stood in the quiet of my office, the scent of old books and lemon polish suddenly comforting again. The room was mine once more, a sanctuary reclaimed. The sunlight filtering through the blinds no longer seemed accusatory. It felt warm and validating. It was the feeling of justice, clean and bright and absolute. I walked back to my desk and sat down. My hands were perfectly steady. I looked at the letter from the resort's legal team. confirming my ownership. I looked at the printout that had been my weapon, and then my gaze settled on the photograph of Teresa. Her smile seemed a little brighter, her eyes sparkling with a shared victory. It was as if she'd been there all along, a quiet compass guiding me through the darkness. I had protected our legacy. My sister called an hour later, her voice frantic. "Roger, Vince is a mess. He's saying you've ruined him. What on earth did you do?" I listened patiently as she relayed his panicked, self-serving version of the story. There was no anger left in me, only a deep, weary sadness for her, for the son she had raised. "I did nothing, Mary," I said calmly. "Vince ruined himself. He built a house of cards and was shocked when it fell over." I didn't need to explain the details to her. The truth would find its own way out, as it always does. The family would whisper. They would learn about the forgery, the lies, the sheer, calculated cruelty of his actions. Vince's public humiliation would be far greater than any I had endured. He had not only failed to steal an asset, he had exposed his own rotten character to the entire family. His reputation was another casualty of his greed. Later that evening, Chloe stopped by. I had called and given her the short version. She walked in and just wrapped her arms around me. "I knew you could do it, Grandpa," she whispered. "I'm so proud of you." Her simple, honest belief in me was worth more than 10 timeshares. It was a reminder that while one part of my family had betrayed me, another had stood by me. The future wasn't just about reclaiming the past. It was about holding on to the good that remained. We sat at the dining table, and I showed her the document from the Secretary of State's website. As a paralegal, she understood its significance immediately. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God," she breathed. "He missed it. The notary, Vince's lawyer, everyone, they all missed it." "They weren't looking," I said. "They only saw what they wanted to see, a confused old man. They never bothered to check the details." The next day, I received a package via courier. It was from Vince's lawyer. There was no letter of apology, no explanation, just a single, notarized document, a new quitclaim deed, properly executed and dated, transferring the property from Vincent Gable back to Roger Gable. It was a silent, unconditional surrender, a white flag from an enemy who knew he was utterly and comprehensively beaten. I filed it away without a second glance. Life settled back into its quiet rhythm. The anger faded, leaving behind a hard-won peace. The travel souvenirs on my shelves no longer seemed to mock me. They were restored, their happy memories polished and bright again. The condo was no longer a cage, but my home, a fortress of my own making, defended and secured. The faint scent of salt air I sometimes imagined seemed less like a ghost and more like a promise. A month later, a new invoice for the yearly maintenance fees arrived. It was addressed to me, Roger Gable. At the bottom, it showed a balance of 0, with a note. "Prior credit applied, $2,500. I smiled. It was a perfect, poetic ending. Vince's greed had not only cost him the prize, but it also paid for my next year of peace, my next year of memories. It was a victory so complete, it had financed itself. I thought about Vince occasionally, but not with anger. I felt a kind of detached pity for him. He was a man who knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. He would spend his life chasing assets, blind to the real treasures of memory, loyalty, and love. He had tried to steal my past, and in doing so, had forfeited any chance of being in my future. It was a loss far greater than any timeshare. The following August, I went back to Unit 3B. I went alone. I walked out onto the balcony, the same one from the photograph, and felt the warm sea breeze on my face. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. It was just as beautiful as I remembered. I thought of Teresa and the joy we had shared in this very spot. It wasn't about defiance or victory anymore. It was about remembrance. It was about peace. I raised the glass to the horizon, a silent toast to her, to us, and to the quiet strength found in dusty memories. The timeshare was more than just a place. It was a testament that the things we cherish are worth fighting for, that truth has a power all its own, and that sometimes the smallest, most overlooked detail can be the difference between ruin and restoration. Back in my condo, I sat at my desk, the original notarized deed safe in my footlocker. The photo of me and Teresa sat in its place of honor, no longer a symbol of loss, but a monument to resilience. My world was back in order. I picked up the phone, dialed the airline, and booked a flight for Chloe, a surprise trip. It was time to start making some new memories.